Hi, and welcome to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast presented by Wolf Precision Incorporated, where we learn about and share long range shooting and custom rifle building. I am your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. Hi, and welcome to episode 95 of Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. In this podcast, we are going to talk about shooting moving targets, why it's so important to learn this art, and how to do it and not really suck at it, I guess, is the big thing. And if you're a hunter and you mumble those words while you're looking at the animal walking across in front of you, please stop, stop. You should be ready, and we're going to teach you how, and we're going to share with you some tricks to really do it well and maybe change your shooting forever. We're also going to go over some tips and tricks on some suppressors. We had some emails and questions come in on some suppressors, as well as some barreled actions. So we had a couple questions come in this week. We're going to try to cover some Q&A at the end of the podcast. But without further ado, one of my favorite subjects to teach and talk about, shooting movers. Here we go. All right, before we get too much started into this, I do want to say a quick thank you to Krieger Barrels. Krieger is a maker of fine cut rifle barrels, and they offer a new KriegerDirect.com, so you can log on, pick your barrel, and have it in as little as 3 to 5 business days. Might not seem like too big of a deal, but right now our barrels can take 6 to 9 months to get here from the time we order them. So we're actually ordering barrels for 2023 as we speak. So the simple fact that you could log on and get your barrel now, that's a really big deal. So stop over to KriegerDirect.com. That's KriegerDirect.com today. Also, we'd like to thank TriggerTech. TriggerTech is a maker of world-class triggers. It is what we use and often asked about here if we use other triggers, have tried this trigger and that trigger. And yes, of course, over the decades, we have shot about everything. And my personal favorite trigger, long before they sponsored a podcast here, is TriggerTech. So if you want to upgrade your rifle and you want to take your shooting up one more notch, if your rifle does not have a good trigger in it, the first thing I really recommend you do is that, and maybe replace the stock. But if you can, start with the trigger, put a good trigger in that rifle, especially shooting movers. You got to have a really good trigger in there. So stop over to TriggerTech.com, that's TriggerTech.com, and see what they have for your rifle today. All right, so we just got out of some cold snaps here in Pennsylvania. Minus 10, I believe, is what I was reading on my way to work this morning as the sun was coming up. Pretty chilly here for PA. We're in the lower highlands area, so we get that weather. So I'm not exactly looking forward to go out and practicing any of the things that I'm talking about here until we get thawed out in some weather, of course. We'll be teaching some classes in Georgia in March. We usually do that just because the weather down there is so much nicer than ours, and a great chance to go down and eat some great barbecue with those guys down there. And one of the classes that we offer is movers. Now, one of the things when you get into shooting a moving target, and I want to talk about a couple different things here, and we'll talk about safety as well. So it might be a little bit longer podcast, but one of the things that, people so hyper focus on, besides, they get the fundamentals down, they get their ability to shoot well, right? And then right away, they're trying to shoot distance. They're practicing and trying to shoot out at 6, 7, 8, 900, 1,000 yards, and they're really trying to stretch out their ability to read the wind and all of these things that get involved into long-range shooting. But one of the things, if you really are a hunter or if you're going to get into competition-type shooting out there, that most people don't master or even understand is the art of engaging moving targets. And I will tell you, it will change your shooting forever. It will make you a better shooter. If you can hit a target moving, standing still just got a lot easier. So it's this big boost in confidence and just basically as a well-rounded overall marksman. There are tools in your tool belt that you should have that really allow you to do the thing that you're after to do. So if you're shooting a competition, if you're a big game hunter, for example, there are things that should be in your tool belt that you should be able to pull out when it's needed and complete the job. And how many times I've hunted with people or have sat there and, the animal's coming out across the field. I can just play this over and over and over again in my mind that here they come, the deer are coming out across, and I can see the person watching. They're waiting. The deer are moving. They're continuing. Now they're halfway across the field, and you can see the shooter getting anxious, like they're not sure what to do, whether the deer are just walking or sometimes on a full hour run, right? But you can sort of watch their lips, and you know what they're thinking. Please stop. Come on. Perfect. Just give me 1 second. Just stop. They're waiting to shoot for the animal to stop. And although there's a time and place, you just have to let them go. So let's just say, this is me personally, if the deer are running 900 yards away out across the field, full bore, I'm probably not going to be taking any moving shots at them. I probably won't have time to get a good distance. I probably don't know exactly how fast they're going. Now, if I was starving to death, would I put one on them? There's that chance I'd probably try to get something to eat, right? But if you have the chance to back off and pursue them later, there's a time and place for everything. So I just don't go, all in blazing away at everything that's moving. That's sort of not the point of this podcast. But there is a time and place when this will pay huge dividends, not just in your ability to complete your mission of the hunt or the match and do well, be successful, of course, but how it really changes your mindset and your confidence in everything else that you do. It's really amazing to watch. So let's talk about movers for just a moment. I had a group of guys with me once. I had a couple knee surgeries, and of course I was at my uncle's farm, and there was a place off to the side. I sort of propped myself up, and it was deer season, so I thought, well, I'll just sit here and watch for some deer to come out and just enjoy a nice quiet afternoon out enjoying the woods here in PA. And these guys come up and sat down beside me and talking away and yakking away. And, I know them pretty well, but as far as hunters go, everybody sort of has their own techniques and styles. And, their way of hunting wasn't really my way, but it was our family farm, and, they were invited to be there, so great. But while we were sitting there, and of course I had a bench set up, and not that I was shooting long range or any of that, but because I was so banged up, I wanted something comfortable to sit on so I could stretch my leg out and sort of be comfortable, I guess you would say. So they just assumed I was hunting long range, sitting there on this bench, but really what I was watching was a gully that was like 200 or 300 yards away. So as they sat there and talked a while, some deer come busting out across the field, obviously pushed out, and they were just hauling behind. They were cranking out across that field. And these two guys were like, hollering at each other, quick, shoot them. Go ahead, shoot them. They're talking to each other, right? And I was like, whoa, hit the brakes here just a second, and the guys were like all frustrated, and they're like, why? And I was like, well, do you know how far they were? Well, no. Do you know how fast they were running? No. Do you know your lead? Right? And so the one guy started complaining, and he was like, this is why I don't like this long-range stuff, and blah, blah, blah. And now keep in mind, I didn't invite them to come and sit with me, and I certainly wasn't shooting long-range. They assumed what they wanted, right? So he started complaining and about all this, about long-range takes too much time and blah, blah, blah. And out come a deer. I know the distances on this farm pretty well, right? I sort of grew up on it. And this doe come hauling. I seen it out of the corner of my eye coming, right? About 300-ish yards. And the guy that was complaining and really getting under my skin, didn't get the words deer out of his mouth before I had already shot. And the deer did a good flip, and that was the end of the story, right? After I shot, this guy winced back and covered up his ears, and he was like, oh, my God. I had a 308 with a muzzle brake on it. And although I was much younger, I'm always honest with my stories, right? This guy was really starting to get under my skin and annoy me, and I'd rather him not be there with me. But hindsight 2020, do I feel bad about it? Maybe a little. But so I hunt with earplugs in. And so this deer come out, and I swung over. It was running, and I drilled him. And, the guy was like, didn't even get the word deer out of his mouth before I was able to put it on the ground. And here's the thing, and I explained to the guy afterwards. Of course, I apologized that, they didn't have earplugs in, and I cracked their ears pretty good. But I said to the guy, I said, look, there's a time and place for everything. Those deer are out there 900 plus yards running like maniacs, and you don't know your rifle well enough. You don't know your leads. There's wind. There's all these things and variables that get involved at these much longer shots that make shots like that sort of, in my book, maybe unethical. That the chances of having a bad shot are really high, right? But if you take that same scenario at a reasonable distance and you know your rifle really, really well, right? So I competed with this 308 in tactical and sniper matches. I've placed with this 308 many times, and I know the rifle inside and out. I know exactly what my lead is at 300 yards. I knew the distance to the animal, and I certainly know how to shoot movers. And so, there's a time and place for everything, and everything has its limits to where you have to make, those ethical decisions. But, it just goes back to what I'm talking about here about putting that one tool in your tool belt that, man, it can save a hunt. It can change your shooting because you go in there with confidence that all of a sudden you go around, let's just say you're going on an Alaskan sheep hunt, right? And you're working your tail off. And you go around the corner, on this really high, steep, rocky terrain up in the mountains, and you're trying to get around an edge to get the shot at the animal. He's around the other side. So you go around the edge, and there he is, and he's starting to walk away. He's going to go around the corner, and you're going to lose him, right? He's 15, 20 seconds away from just walking right around the corner. Well, rather than just taking a wild guess and shooting, knowing your rifle well enough and saying, hey, that's a reasonable distance. I know my dope at 300 yards is 1.1 mils. I know my lead on a 3 mile an hour would be, let's just say at that distance, 0.5 mils or 1 mil or whatever you want to calculate it out to. But if you know ahead of time, you can jump on that rifle, move in front of the animal, hold over with a technique called holdover, and hold off for the wind, or in this case, the mover. Let the mover walk into the appropriate lead. You pull the trigger, the animal falls down dead, and it's within seconds of getting on the gun. I am talking like jaw-dropping seconds. Most people that watch somebody do this, they think there's something magical, like Annie Oakley or Daniel Boone, Davy Crockett. Somebody inserted something in your DNA that made you special, that you were just pulled off an amazing shot. And when you do that, have some fun with it. When you get off the rifle and you look at the person now who's staring at you, wanting to know, how did you just do that? You just blow on your knuckles, go, and wipe them on your chest and smile, right? Don't share all of your secrets all the time. But it's a skill. It's a skill. So we have some formulas that we use here, and I actually wrote the formula for the class because, 20 some years ago in sniper matches, tactical matches, you did get movers once in a while, and there wasn't a lot of computers that were out there that would generate this information. There wasn't a lot of good information, outside of like the military would issue, mover cards, and they would already have their leads and everything figured out for them because they all shoot the same ammo, same bullet, everything else. But I sat down and wrote the formula for the class that we teach because I don't want it to be caliber specific. So it takes your fingerprint from your rifle and allows you to calculate your lead for your mover. It's old school, and it's a little bit of a lengthy formula. It takes, a couple seconds. But what I really tell people to do is do a little bit of homework ahead of time. If you're going on an elk hunt, know the average walking speed of an elk, and then maybe do a 300-yard calculation. Know the average running speed or trot of an elk, and then do a 300-yard calculation. And just keep those numbers, have them on your rifle along with your click chart, try to memorize them, because when the moment gets there, if you know those numbers, plus or minus 100, 150 yards, you're good. You're going to harvest that animal. And man, that can be worth it. Finish the job. There is a couple more things you should learn how to do to complete the job, to go and be successful in the things that you're trying to go and do. And a lot of times that involves being prepared when that opportunity is there, but most people don't know what to do with it. So for example, like coyote hunting or if you're going out on a wolf hunt, something like that, knowing the average trot speed of a wolf, knowing the average, full out run. Just to know, because in field hunting situations, a lot of times you don't have time to calculate it from a cold scenario. So There's the elk. You just saw him, right? And all of a sudden, he's 50 yards away from the edge of the trees, and he turns and he starts walking. Well, the clock is ticking, and you might only have 5 or 10 seconds to get a distance and get a lead on him and shoot. Not quite enough time to pull the shot off. So doing your homework in advance. Now, I'm not going to share on the podcast the formula that we use. We try not to publicly just throw the stuff out there for anybody to use, because there are people that have ill intentions with all kinds of stuff. And, we sort of screen people coming to the schools here. We screen them, making sure that, hey, these are hunters. These are legit people that are using this for good, right? They're going out and using it as in match scenarios, and are going to go out and use it in hunting scenarios, right? So we're just not going to publicize all the calculations that we do and how we do it. But we do teach it at our long-range shooting school. We do teach it at the movers class as well. And there are tons of formulas that you can look up online and sort of get an idea about how some different people either calculate their movers, or some of the different computers now that will calculate. You put in all of your information, and it'll tell you your lead in movers. I would write those numbers down. I would, if I'm going on a specific hunt. If I go to a match, a lot of times I don't take a giant card with all these calculations already done on it. I actually have the formula, and what I'll do is I'll calculate the distance and the speed that I think the mover's working at or moving, and then I'll do a calculation right there. But on a hunt, it's different. I'm going to try to do a little bit of homework ahead of time. Now, the one thing you need to know if you're going to engage movers is you got to have your time of flight. So you got to know how long it's going to take for the bullet to get to that distance, and then there's calculation that you're going to do from there. So when we teach movers, and I think one of the best ways to teach this, and then I think there's a bad way to teach this, and I'll share with you both, but I am going to really encourage you to go and find a moving class, a moving target class, where I don't care where it's at. And I prefer old school with pits first, and then of course a lot of the places have mechanical movers that just bounce back and forth, sort of like a game of Pong or something, where you're going to get in front of it and shoot, get in front of it and shoot. You're going to start getting this rhythm down. I would take that over not getting a chance to practice it or do it at all, for sure. But my preference for teaching movers, and what I like to do, is throw a totally different realm of realism to it. And we use a thing called pits, where the participants in the class are split in half. Half are in the pits and half are back on the firing line with me. And then the students in the pits are under guidance in there, and they'll be trained on how to present the movers and walk with the movers. So you'll actually be carrying the target that's being shot over your head, which is really cool. So if you want to go someplace and sort of get the experience of that whole thing going on, no better place to do it than to practicing and training with movers. Now, I will tell you that we are very safe in what we do. How we operate movers in pits and everything else. Safety is always, always, always my number one goal. And so we're not going to put you in harm's way training this way. But if you want a good idea on how we do it, you can go over to our YouTube channel. It's Wolf Precision. Or just go to our website. It's wolfprecision.net, and click on the Moving Target School. And we actually put up a YouTube video we shot with a drone a couple years ago, just to give you an idea about how we train it. But what we do is we put up a 10-inch balloon inside an IPSC 45 target. It's about the size of a 10 ring on a 1,000-yard bench rest target. We cut out a hole, and we stuff it with a 10-inch balloon, a really bright color of some kind. So we have like red, blue, green, yellow, orange, all these colors. And as the targets are being presented and coming in different directions, all that crazy stuff, we can assign it and say, hey, shooter 2, yellow, shooter 3, red, and we can tell you, hey, you present orange from the right, yellow from the left, and it sort of keeps the firing line very organized. But also what it does, it gives you instant feedback when you hit it. So if you see it, it's nice and bright, you hit it, the balloon pops out of the center, and you're off to the races, working the bolt and engaging another mover. Now, one of the reasons, before I get into actual talking about some tips for it, one of the reasons why we train this way is because it gives you a sense of realism. Like, there's an attachment to that. The balloon is not mechanical, just moving back and forth at this perfect speed. Now, of course, we have a GPS in the pits, and we train up the students to walk at a certain speed. Because we're training, we want everybody to have a really good chance of actually hitting the targets. So we're going to give you speed we want you to walk. That way, the guys that are shooting or girls that are shooting have a chance to do some good calculations. But that said, when there's somebody actually moving the target, it gives a sense of realism. It pauses, it moves a little bit in the wind, it shakes. It's not perfect. And when you start engaging those targets, you'll realize that that's not as important as your fundamentals and how you're engaging the target itself, which is really cool. So let me give you some pointers here, because I think this is just one of those things you should have to learn to do. Many guys have come and girls have come to our moving targets. We've been doing this for probably over a decade with the movers class. And I will tell you this, it is not uncommon for people to leave after 2 days and say that is the most fun they ever had with a rifle. That's the truth. It is about as much fun as you can have with a rifle. It's a lot of shooting, and man, does it give you that boost of confidence. And here's why. We take a 10-inch balloon walking at 600 yards and you just broke it. Most people can't hit it standing still. That's just the truth. That's cool. We had somebody at a show once. We did the NRA annual meeting a couple years ago, and we had this worked into our little video display, the movers. And, you know, how people are at shows. One guy walked by and was like, did this, how many guys hit that? He gave us one of these, like, yeah, that's all cool and all, but how many are first round hits at 1,000 yards? Like sort of being sarcastic or snarly, I guess, about it. And I looked at the guy and I was like, oh, that's funny you ask. 2. We had a gentleman with a gas-operated .308 and a young lady with a .223, both at 1,000-yard, 10-inch moving target, hit it on the first round. How cool is that? These people, when they hit it, their eyes were as big as saucers, like, oh my God, I hit it, and they're all excited. And, that's what it's about. Where most people couldn't hit that 10-inch balloon if it was setting perfectly still on the ground, right? Pretty cool. So let's talk about some ways to train movers, and then we want to get on to a couple Q&As that we have. I just want to give you a couple tips. The first thing is you got to be super solid on fundamentals, and you have to have a world-class trigger pull. If the gun does not go off exactly when you want it to, you're going to shoot in front or behind the target. So here's where like a Trigger Tech trigger, give them a plug, with a really consistent pull weight pays dividends. Now, most people engage moving targets one of 2 ways. They'll either do what we call a trap, which is my preferred way. They'll get in front with their reticle, let the target walk into the appropriate lead, and break the shot and let the target walk into the bullet, basically. So they're remaining stable in their firing position, no movement. They get in front, they wait, they trap the target. The other one is called tracking, where people actually put their lead on the target and move with it and try to shoot while in motion. And there are people that follow both and they really like one or the other. But my preference is to trap first, track second. So if it passes my trap hold, then I'll start tracking it and shoot it that way. That's the 2 ways that you're going to go after it. The other thing you're going to have, and just giving you some tips before you go and take any movers class, right? You have to have great working dope for your rifle. You have to have the elevation worked out, because if you're high or low, you're going to shoot over or under the mover, right? What we do when we get to Georgia, because it's at a totally different, sea level than here, so sometimes people's dope does change, and it also changes with all the environmental conditions that can happen as well, right? Is we set some steel up to let them verify their dope 1 or 2 shots, just in case somebody's off a little bit, because you don't want to spend, all afternoon shooting over all the movers only to realize that your dope was off 2/10. That's not a good time, right? But you got to have good working dope for your rifle. You have to know your rifle. You have to have really solid fundamentals of marksmanship. So one of the prerequisites to coming to the movers class is you had to have taken a long-range shooting school or a fundamentals class that qualifies you to be there. So we would like you to come to our school here to get prepped up, or at least have attended a good school or really be tuned up with your rifle to come, because if you don't have really good, solid fundamentals, making the target move isn't going to help you any, right? You've got to be super solid. And you've got to have the idea of how fundamentals work, how the rifle's supposed to recoil, how to do a really good follow-up shot. And we teach this while we're there. Don't get me wrong. But it's always nice when the students come there and they're really dialed in. They know their fundamentals pretty well and they know their dope. And then the rest is just a learning curve on how they engage the mover, how they time the shots, what they're looking for. Once they get that underneath them, it's amazing to watch. Like the first half of the first day, you can see people struggling a little bit. We usually start closer to 300 yards. And again, we're only shooting 10-inch balloons. And then we start stepping them back, and you'll start to see them struggle a little bit more. They're just getting that timing down. And we have a way that we teach this, actually. So it's not a random, we just bounce you all over the place. There's a rhyme and reason, without giving too many of the secrets up here, on how we do it. We will back you up, and then we actually, as we get that, we cycle through another set. And when we cycle through the second set, all of a sudden all the bells and whistles start going off and people's light bulbs start getting turned on, and they're like, oh my God, this is easy. And then it's off to the races. And then they're having tons of fun, right? Engaging targets from different directions, multiple targets coming from other directions. It really is a great time. But once you leave, you're going to have that confidence that anything within 200 or 300 yards, walking or otherwise, if you want to put a round on it, you could probably put a round on it, so might save you that hunt. It might save you that match. I mean, I have one in place in a lot of the earlier sniper matches simply from clearing the movers, and that's the truth. One match in particular was a crazy thing. I mean, you had to run up to 200 yards, starting from the word go. It was timed with all of your equipment, backpack, everything, and you had to engage a target. As soon as you shot, another target presented itself from a different direction. You had to pick up this giant duffel bag that weighed like 100 pounds. With your pack and your rifle. It was like your buddy was wounded, right? And you had to hustle back to 50 yards, reset, and engage that target. And then when you shot, another target presented itself moving, and you had to pick everything up again, backpack, all of your gear, plus this super heavy duffel bag full of God knows what was in it. And you had to go running again back another 50 or 100 yards. And you had to make it there before the target made it to the end of the presentation, because if you didn't make it back in time, the target went down, you didn't get even a chance to shoot at it. And in one particular stage, I perfectly cleared the entire thing, and it bumped me from that top 5 to actually winning the entire 3-day match, which is really cool. And one guy there was like, he was an instructor for the military, and he said, I would have bet money no one's going to clear this, because it was that strenuous of, timed hustle. By the time you're done, you can't get enough oxygen in you. And I will always say that there's luck involved. So anytime you're shooting, there's always luck involved, right? I've missed just as many targets as I've hit over the years, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But, I was able to stay focused, practice good technique, focus on fundamentals when I was ready to shoot, time that shot, and I cleared it, and it bumped me from the top 5 to first place, which was really, really cool. So pointers is make sure you have good dope, make sure you know your rifle, make sure you're fundamentally sound. And then the other thing is making sure you've got a really good reticle that you understand and that it's clean, because you don't want to be searching around through a big grid square of lines and dashes everywhere while you're engaging the mover, right? You want to be able to find where you're supposed to be waiting for that shot at, focus on that, let the target walk into the appropriate lead, and then pull the trigger, right? Now, the trigger pull here is hugely important. We actually spend the first half, like we have a little meeting on Friday night, and we'll go over it again on Saturday morning about trigger pull and how important this really is. And we try to keep people focused on fundamentals, not get too hyper-focused on the target, because they will start missing. But really, really sweet trigger pull. Timing is everything. The other thing, it's like different. When you're shooting slung, or you're shooting, at a stationary target in a less than perfect situation, we have a technique here. We tell folks, look at the target, bring your reticle to the target, right? It will draw you in a little bit faster, a little bit easier, and we teach it at the shooting school. It's a fundamentals thing, right? But movers is a 180 opposite. You're getting in front of the target, and you're focusing on your shot point, not the target itself. And you're letting the target walk into that shot point. So it's a little bit of a 180 technique, but it works really well once you get it down pat. So if you get a chance, I'm just going to recommend it. Look, I think everybody should learn how to shoot movers. I think everybody should go and take a class on it, because it really is that much fun. And my God, it just changes your shooting forever, especially for hunting, because it enables you to take shots that most people won't, most people can't, and most people don't know how. And so it just removes you from that and gives you this great tool that if the opportunity presents itself and the situation is that at which you can get down and get comfortable, get a good fundamental. I mean, as you're setting up, you're going to know, hey, this is good. I've got this. You get on the animal, you get in front of it, it's still walking. I've got this. You move way out front, you let the animal walk to the lead, you break the shot, and the animal falls down dead. It just works just like that. So you get a chance. I'm going to really encourage you to find a movers class anywhere that you can go to. You will have an absolute fun, low recoiling rifle, suppressed if you can. You want to work on your fundamentals. Don't take your 300 Win Mag there in a hunting class rifle and be bouncing your rifle all over the place, not being able to do good follow through and see your own impact, stuff like that. And then, 223, I think, is a great choice. 22 Creed, 6.5 Creed, 6 Dashers, any of the 6mm, stuff like that. But make sure you take a low recoiling rifle that you can shoot the daylights out of it and not really get beat up recoil-wise, but also be able to do really quick and efficient follow-up shots. In other words, you don't lose the target and start looking for it again. You shoot, and if you miss, you can hurry up, work the bolt, get in front of it again, and try it again without bouncing too much off target. So we had a couple of questions that were submitted, and I do want to touch base on a couple that I think are really important. So I mentioned suppressors, and I am a huge advocate of suppressors. There's just, my hearing is almost destroyed I did a lot of time in aviation and, of course, law enforcement and shooting my entire life. Even pistols when I was a kid, like 22 pistols, revolvers, the old school, they almost look like, Western guns, but horrible for your ears. And of course, we were kids. We didn't know that, hey, you should have earplugs in. And of course, the ringing of your ears, that was just a sign you had a good day, right? So here I am at 50, in the last hearing test I had, they're like, you should probably consider getting hearing aids. And I was like, not yet. I'm not that deaf. So, but protect your ears. I will tell you that suppressors have changed everything that I've done as far as shooting. I use them for everything. I don't shoot without it. And if I was in a hunting scenario, even if I got like an ultra short suppressor, like we have a Thunder Beast Ultra 7 that we put on my 22 Creed and my hunting rifles, that it's a little bit shorter, but it still makes it hearing safe, and I'm not cracking my ears like crazy, and especially in the calibers that we use. But we had a gentleman that got a Thunder Beast Arms suppressor with the peel washers, and he has one of our custom rifles. And I had just gotten off the phone with him here recently, and I wanted to bring this up on the podcast. When you're using a suppressed rifle, make sure that we always recommend direct thread, especially for a bolt gun. And if you have to use one that has a muzzle brake, what we really recommend to do is to screw the muzzle brake in the suppressor. If the suppressor design allows it, lock it into the suppressor and use it like a direct thread. Now don't permanently glue it in there, but put it in there nice and stiff that basically your suppressor now is a direct thread onto the shoulder of your barrel. No timed brakes, no crush washers, no peel washers, stuff like that. Because I will tell you that you can have a world-class rifle and a world-class suppressor, and that process can cause you tons of issues in inaccuracy, massive movements in your point of impact. So, for example, we have a customer down south that has a great shooting 6.5 PRC. I mean, just a hammer of a rifle. He sent me all kinds of pics, and, the rifle's doing great. But he used this peel set of washers, put a suppressor on, took it to the range. His point of impact was like 8 or 9 inches off. And then it moved once or twice. And he was like, ooh, that's not good. What's going on? The rifle is just hammering, right? Now, all of a sudden, it's not shooting well at all. He's not getting baffle strikes, but it's not shooting well. He pulled the suppressor off and the brake off. The rifle shot exactly the way it was supposed to, just a hammer. What he did is exactly what I'm telling you to do, is he took the peel washers and all that crap off. He stuck the muzzle brake in the suppressor, locked it in, sort of like you would do with just leaving it in the suppressor itself, because, the only time you need the brake timed is if you're going to shoot it without the suppressor, right? So you take the suppressor off and your brake is ported left and right perfectly level. But if you're shooting just always suppressed, it doesn't matter where it's at, timed on your rifle, as long as the suppressor is over it, right? It's not going to hurt anything. So he took it all apart. He pulled those peel washers off. He put the brake into the suppressor, and the rifle was just an absolute hammer. And he was stunned, so much so that he actually called me. Like it's 8 o'clock in the morning, and my phone's ringing here, and I'm like, oh, I know that number. So I picked it up, and he goes, I got a story to tell you, right? That's how much it surprised him. And he asked, well, how can that happen? He said maybe he's seen a little roll or a mark where when he was tightening it down, that final tight, that maybe one of the peel washers folded on itself or something like that, but it wasn't anything dramatic, and he wasn't getting baffle strikes. And I said to him, all it takes is for that suppressor to get canted ever so slightly because they're so long that the end of it is moving a lot more than what the back would indicate, right? And as the bullet is traveling through the suppressor, it is getting closer to one side in the suppressor more than the other, so leaving a big gap, for say. And what happens a lot of times, those gases will go blowing by the bullet on one side, not the other, or it's just slightly rubbing. And it's not really baffle striking, but it's in there, right? And man, it will just go all over the place. Even we did a shooting school down in Georgia. We did a long-range shooting school in November, and we had all the guys there. They had Dead Air, I think, was the suppressor, which, by the way, were really impressive. I can't wait to talk to those guys and maybe try to get one here for testing. But they did exactly what I'm telling you to do. They took the suppressor and they screwed the muzzle brake adapter into the suppressor and sort of locked it in, and then put that on the rifle. They did not time the brake. If you have a bolt gun that's really accurate, I do not like using crush washers or peel washers or anything like that to time brakes to then put the suppressor on. I really prefer direct thread suppressors for that reason. They're going to lock up tight against that back shoulder, no issues whatsoever, and it's repeatable. So you can take that suppressor on and off, leave that thread adapter in it, and it'll go back on and off, no problem at all. And when you take your suppressor on and off, it'll hit the same spot. Like, we do it at the school here all the time. We'll take the guns, and sometimes they're not even shooting the same suppressor. We have several Thunder Beast arms, all Ultra 9s. But, it might, one serial number might wind up on one rifle and one serial number wind up on a different rifle between classes. And it really doesn't change anything. It doesn't change your point of impact. They shoot exactly the same. And that's how they're supposed to work. But just a heads up when you get this stuff put together is, this is the problem it can cause, and man, it will make you scratch your head as a shooter. Like, what is going on? Like, we had them here, one of the highest end suppressor companies in the country, with a muzzle brake adapter that needed to be timed. We tested, and we had two of them serial numbers back to back, and take the Thunder Beast on and off, no really point of impact shift, accuracy was awesome. We put these high end suppressors on, and guess what? Baffle strikes in both of them. Now, when it all boiled down to what caused the baffle strikes in them is that they had the muzzle brakes themselves were actually off, because it's sort of like a lock system that ratcheted on, and the muzzle brakes were out of sync. So their tolerances weren't correct. When they were machined, some of the surfaces were off from each other, causing the actual baffle strikes. But again, this just goes back to why we tell everybody, look, if you're really into bolt action rifles and you're shooting this stuff long range, especially suppressed, either direct thread or get that locked into the suppressor so it acts like a direct thread. And that way you can just take it on and off and really not have these issues. The last thing I want to touch base on is we do get customers that asked about barreled actions and then what they can do to sort of get their rifle up and running. So the first thing that we do is we tell customers, if you have components already, so let's just say you already have a stock, MDT ACC chassis, and you're ready to go on and build your custom rifle, we will accept those components. However, though, we still do the complete build. So included into the cost of the builds, of course, like tier 1 or tier 2s, you can come in and help us and go through the entire process of building the rifle, which we think is cool. You can go to the range and we're going to zero it and fit it and spend some time shooting it, which is always a great time as well. But we credit you back for your components and the time that we don't have to spend purchasing it and ordering it and all the other things. So we try to work with you on that way. If you have no components whatsoever, then we do offer it as a complete build. We just don't send out the barreled actions because we do want you to send those stocks to us to look for issues and problems and other things that do happen. And with chassis, we were just talking about this the other day. Some of them are really getting out of spec, whether they're being jigged wrong or clamped too tight and springing back. There are issues that come up. And the last thing we want to do is send out a rifle, to be dropped into a stock and all of a sudden the stock have an issue and, us going through the ropes trying to get it back here to figure out what's going on, what happened. And we found this before. So this isn't anything new. Stocks really are probably the weakest link in our system right now that we sort of have to look them over. And if they needed bedded, then we bed them or do whatever we need to correct them. But gives us an opportunity to look it over to make sure everything's squared away, ready to go, and this rifle is ready to run. So, and then the last question we got Customer had asked about, hey, I just got I think in this case he had a 300 Winchester short mag and he had a cheap stock on it and, factory trigger, all these things. Is that a good place to start learning the art of long range shooting? Out of the gate, I would say caliber-wise, no, because the 300 WSMs, especially in lighter weight rifles, just bounce and kick around a lot. So you're really going to struggle with your fundamentals. But let's remove the caliber part of it and talk about this, because we talk about it at our long-range shooting school, actually, how if you have a good shooting rifle, you don't have to go and get a Ferrari to learn to drive. Most of us don't have that opportunity. So you can really take a great factory rifle that's shooting well, do a couple small modifications, and really go out and enjoy the art of long-range shooting and get started. Spend your money on ammunition and training and all the other things and start working on it from there, right? But replacing the stock is a big one. Most stocks really aren't designed to fit most shooters. They don't have a lot of adjustability to them, adjustable length to pull and cheek piece, and getting a stock to fit you well is really important to 700 yards and just absolutely necessity beyond 700. So if you're going to shoot regularly to 1,000 yards, that stock really has to fit you perfectly for you to feel comfortable behind the gun and just focus on fundamentals. If you're not, you're going to constantly be fidgeting and struggling with it a little bit, never really feeling quite right, and that just translates to stuff going wrong downrange. And then the other part was the triggers. So we had a question on, should I upgrade my trigger? And I will say in this part, yes. A lot of factory triggers are heavy or heavier than what they should be. I'm not a fan of going super light, so I don't shoot a 4-ounce trigger in my gun. My guns are usually set about 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds, but they don't have a great break. They can be creepy, as you're pulling them back. They're not just that clean snap. And, I really will tell you that I love Trigger Tech triggers. I think they're fantastic triggers. That's what we put them here. And the main reason is because they break so nice. So we can set a trigger up to 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds at our school guns. And customers think they're 1 pound triggers because they break so clean. I mean, it just shocks them. They're like click. And if you're engaging movers like we were just talking about, even all the more important to have a great trigger pull and have a really good breaking trigger. So yes, I would address the stock and I would absolutely address the trigger if need be. But probably stock first, unless it's an absolute horrid trigger. But for example, Tikkas actually have pretty decent triggers and can get down to about 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds, somewhere in there. And, in that case, you could upgrade the stock to something really comfortable for you and then focus on the trigger later if need be. Lastly, I do want to say a quick thanks to MDT. MDT is a proud sponsor of the show and makes great world-class chassis and a lot of new ones coming out this year. So we just finished up an HNT 26 Skunk Works build. So if you go on our website, you'll see we put it up in our for sale section. We were playing around with some lightweight Kriegers and trying to come up with some alternatives to carbon that might be a hunting rifle in the future. But we just put up an HNT 26 Skunk Works build. It's up on our website now. You can take a look at it. We also posted a small video up on YouTube on what we were thinking and trying to go for with it. But, MDT makes world-class chassis, a lot of custom chassis that fit a lot of other, footprints. So our rifles are 700 clones. And so, we can order anything that we need from them that'll fit our rifles perfectly. But same thing with some of the other makes and models that they make stocks for as well. So if you have a Tikka, or if you have another brand, a Ruger, there's a good chance that they probably have an inlet that will work for you. So thank you, MDT, for being a proud sponsor of the show and for supporting the show over the years. We really appreciate it. So thank you, MDT. All right, so thank you so much for taking the time to join us here. I want to take a little bit of time to talk about the movers. As you can tell, I'm pretty passionate about it. This podcast a little longer than normal. And I'll tell you, if you find a school that you can go to outside of just making sure it's a safe school and that they know what they're doing and that when you get there, you're confident you're in good hands, right? Because shooting movers definitely has a lot more going on than being in a stagnant, training class. So make sure you're in good hands. If you'd like to join us, we have our moving target class. It's going in March of this year. It's towards the end of March. And we have a long-range shooting school the 3 days prior. So it's one of those opportunities. If you would like to come down and join us for both, you could attend the long-range shooting school, spill right over into our movers class, and have a great 5-day shooting week. So would love to have you. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us. You're always more than welcome to share the podcast if you know other people that are interested in long-range shooting. So we really appreciate that. And also feel free to stop over to our YouTube channel. We're posting up a lot of our podcasts are getting caught up. So eventually our podcast will be posted up on YouTube as well each week. But we got a lot of really cool videos we've been posting up with more to follow. So if you're interested in that type of format and some of the things that we're talking about and doing, you can stop over to Wolf Precision's YouTube channel. So you can follow us, like us, hit the notification bell when new stuff comes out. You get notified. We really appreciate that as well. So again, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here. My name is Jamie Dotson. I'm your host, and you're listening to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building Podcast.